Good morning, everybody. Today is January the 21st, 2025, virtual meeting for the Policy Committee, our first meeting of the new year. Call to order. Can I get approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
In favor by the sign of aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposers nay. Nay. Approval of our open session minutes on today. Can I get approval of those minutes?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor by the sign of aye.
Yeah. Aye. Aye. Sorry.
Opposers nay.
It's yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think the code got us all froze.
I know, like freeze.
Okay. All right. Policies for second review.
Yes, good morning. We have a number of policies for second review. I'll go through them one by one. And if there's any questions or concerns, we can try and answer those. The first is policy 1-18 at grievances, complaints, and appeals. This policy was reviewed in November by the committee and then in December by the board. As you know, we didn't have a December policy committee meeting, so that's why it's for second review today. There's been no stakeholder input, and staff asked that this policy go for approval at the February meeting. And just as a reminder, the revisions in this policy were being recommended to provide clarification and consistency in practice. Okay, I'll go on to the next one. There's no questions. Policy 2-02, budget development, planning, and adoption by resolution. This one was also reviewed by the committee in November and by the board in December. There's been no stakeholder input since that time, and staff would also request that this go for approval at the February meeting. And the revisions to this policy are being recommended for clarification purposes. Okay, if there's no questions, I'll go on to policy 2-18, organization of the purchasing function. This one was also reviewed in November by the committee and December by the board. There's been no stakeholder input since that time, and staff would ask that this go for approval at the February meeting. And these revisions are also being recommended for clarification. These policies from Chapter 2 were all done as part of our regular review.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the next one is 2-21, continuing contracts. Again, this was reviewed by the committee in November and the board in December. There's been no stakeholder input, and staff would ask that this go for approval at February. And this is being recommended to conform with the procedures adopted or that are in place by the board and the finance department. Policy 3-05A, use of tobacco products. This was reviewed by the committee in November and the board in December. There's been no stakeholder input since that time, and staff would ask that this go for approval at the February meeting. The revisions in this policy are being recommended to conform with some new definitions in state law. Policy 5-12, student promotion and accountability. This one was also reviewed in November by the committee and December by the board. There's been no stakeholder input since that time, and staff requests that this go for approval at the February meeting. The revisions in this policy are recommended to conform with some new requirements in state law from last session. The last one is the proposed new policy, web page development. And this policy was reviewed in November by the committee and in December by the board. There's been no stakeholder input, and staff would ask that this go for approval at the February meeting. And this policy is being proposed to address some protocols, including some website accessibility requirements. Those are all the policies for second review.
Yes, ma'am. Attorney Morris, if I could, if you could, just for clarity for those who may be listening, when you make the statement about no stakeholder input, what does that mean? No one has emailed any concerns about the policy or what have you?
Yeah, no one has reached out, communicated phone, email, at Board of Education meetings. There's been silence on the policy.
Okay. And so if anyone has any concerns, they are able to not just email board members, but are they able to email you as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Okay, board, we've heard the policies for second review. Can we make a motion to send policy 1-18, policy 2-02, policy 2-18, policy 2-21, policy 3-05, policy 5-12, as well as the proposed new policy to the full board in our February meeting?
So moved.
Get a second?
Take it.
All right, all in favor by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, thank you. All right, policies for first review.
Okay, we have 4 policies for first review today. Actually 3 policies in administrative guideline. The first one is the administrative guidelines to policy 2-25 sales representatives. This came up as part of the regular review of policies, and the revisions are being recommended for clarification to make sure that people understand what there's a statute that talks about people not being able to sell items to staff during this instructional day. So this helps provide some clarification on the expectations in law and the expectations of the district. This has gone to Ms. McLam for review, and staff would ask that this go for review at the February meeting.
So moved.
Okay. Attorney Morris, would you like for all of them to be presented first and then we vote at the end?
However you prefer.
Okay, let's do that. Let's go through all of them and then we'll vote on all of them like we just did the
Okay.
previous policies.
The next one, if there's no questions, is policy 4-03, prohibition of gang and gang activities. This policy is part of the regular review, and it's being recommended the revisions to for clarification and conform with some legal requirements that we have in place, and that staff would ask that this go for first review at the February meeting.
Attorney Morris, I do have a question. What,
Yep.
Along with this policy, I do know that gangs has definitely been a major concern in the community. Do we have a list of the identified gangs in the community? And my second question would be, how are we working alongside with the police departments of the local that those schools are affected by, as well as community, to help with the decrease in young people even wanting to identify being a part of a gang?
I will try and do the best. I'm not sure I have all the
Yeah,
information. I know that Mr. McGraw works very closely with local law enforcement on this issue. I've personally been a part of some meetings where we've had some issues where there's particular gang activity in some schools. And so I know that he works very closely with the Sheriff's Department, Monroe PD, as well as law enforcement in other jurisdictions like Waxhaw, Stallings, to ensure that we have the most up-to-date information on the gangs that are in our community, as well as the activities that may be going on. If there's things that happen over the weekend that involve gang members. And I know that Mr. McGraw works very closely, especially when we're looking at the alternative school for activities, gang actions that may have happened at school, to make sure that we are not putting rival gang members together in the, at the same setting at the same time, to minimize the risk of continued behaviors. So I do know that he works very closely. And I think the safety committee, this is a discussion that they have at the safety committee as well.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, the next two, student wellness and student health services, 4-11 and 4-22. I'll take those together because they're part of the same issue. Were some changes in State Board of Education policy. And so we made revisions to address those changes to policy 4-11 and 4-22. The law also requires that these be reviewed by the Student Health Advisory Council prior to coming to the board for any changes, and that has occurred. Miss Wendy Nielsen, our Director of School Nursing, took those to the SHAC, and they were comfortable with the revisions that were being proposed, and they're coming to you today. So staff would ask that 4-11 student wellness and 4-22 student health services also go to the board for first review at the November meeting. My
I have
goodness,
a question.
February meeting. Yes,
have a
ma'am.
question. How are we gonna do this in high school? On page, under C, beginning with 25, 26, students in grades 9 to 10 must be provide with 60 minutes of physical. How are we gonna do that?
Yeah, that's a concern, and I'll let Dr. Houlihan jump in on that. That's a concern that we have as well. That was put in by the State Board of Education as a legal requirement. And we're concerned with how to implement that as well. When you look at that in conjunction with the credit requirements that have been reduced by the state, by the courses that are now being required, we're kind of running out of time in the school day to get all this done. I do know that Dr. Tyson is working with principals to try and figure out a way to work this into the daily schedule. Dr. Glenn, did I miss anything on it is an interesting requirement.
No, you're correct. This is the expansion of what the state of North Carolina has recently or has always called Healthy Active Child. And it's currently in place for grades kindergarten through 8th grade. And we meet that requirement every day, every week through PE and recess and what our middle schools call team time. But when you get to high school, beyond PE in 9th or 10th grade, when you talk about all children 9 through 12 having to do this, it's one of those ideas that I completely understand the premise of we want our children to be active and those kinds of things. But when you're in a 4-block schedule like we have, it becomes very hard to implement. So this is an item I do believe we need to put on our legislative agenda, even though it's not necessarily and we'll check on this, a general statute. If it's coming out of legal policy, I do wonder if the legislature should look at this issue along with other new requirements that are going to be very difficult to implement without additional staff. And we'll be talking about that as we move forward this semester. But Michelle's right. We are actively meeting with high school principals to try to figure out if this doesn't change, how do we implement it? And it's a great question.
That's all I had.
I mean, so what do we suggest in this? I
Well,
mean,
because the
well, no,
state-
I understand that. I'm saying, but what do we in the case now with moving forward with like to the board? Like, what are we? What are we doing now with this? I mean, are we?
Yeah, it's 60 minutes a week. So that's 12 minutes every day, right? So by
Yes.
walking to their classes, does that count?
Yeah, I mean, that's
seriously.
honestly, that's one of the
No,
things that we're looking at is very creative is when if you were to expand the number of minutes during your transitions from block to block, would that count? Right? That's just one idea that even principals have raised, but we have to see clarity. So I think, Ms. Green, what Michelle's recommendation is because this is already a legal policy,
Mhm.
the proposal under first review is to move it forward. We'll present this to our delegation and other leaders at the state for possible change. And if it changes, we'll come back to this committee under this policy and we'll change the policy.
Okay, that was my question, and you worded it better. But yes, I was trying to figure out how are we gonna get this passed along if you know what I mean. We're not sure, but okay, I get it.
It is. I agree with you. It's not like when we were in high school, you had the class and maybe you went outside for the courtyard or something like that. That
Mhm.
would count, but it's totally different now.
Yeah,
Okay,
I miss the 8 periods in the day.
absolutely.
Mm.
Okay, we can continue. Is that it, Attorney Morris?
That's all of them. Yep.
Okay. All right. And the recommendation is to take this to the board in February, correct?
Correct. For
moved.
first review. Mhm.
And get a second.
Second,
All right. All in favor by the sign of aye.
I
All right. No opposes. Thank you so much, team. My next meeting will be December the 5th. Excuse me, not December. Somebody said November. I said
I did.
December.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. February the 18th, 2025 at 8 a.m. And it will also be virtual as well. And I meant to say this before we started, but welcome Mr. Tucker to the policy committee. This is your first committee meeting. And so we welcome you. And please feel free if you have any questions from anything that's shared during our time of meeting, please do not hesitate to ask as many questions as you would like. All right.
Sounds good, John. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
I was expecting to call you yesterday. I got 3 kids down with a stomach virus, so it's
Oh,
a
man.
little chaotic at the house.
Okay, don't call me. It might transfer through the phone, and then I'll be home.
Yeah.
So let me know when it's over. But feel free to call me anytime, brother.
No, I appreciate it, man.
All right. Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. All in favor by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposers nay. All right. You all have a great day, and we'll see you real soon.
Thank
Later.
you.
Thank you too.
Thank you.